Video 3. How to attack atheists. Okay, this one has to be in parts, so this is like video 2, part 1 of whatever, because there's so much to cover that I have to break it down into smaller chunks. It's all Matt's fault. It's all your fault, Slick. Alright, moving on. Here we go. Part 1 of whatever of video 2, the quote. By asking questions, atheism is an intellectual position. What reasons do you have for holding that position? Your reasons are based upon logic and or evidence or lack of it. So, is there any reason/evidence for your holding your position that you defend? End quote. This has some issues with it. I don't like the idea of attacking your opponent by asking questions. That's not really what the information exchange dialogue is supposed to be. You're supposed to be trying to find out more about what it is they believe or don't believe and why. But yeah, it's such a moot point in light of all the other bad points that are made that I'll let it slide. Atheism being an intellectual position, not necessarily so. There are people that have not been raised with the idea of God or religion, so as an adult they entered the world and never came across that idea until later in life. And of course there's a tribe somewhere that has no idea of God whatsoever, no concept, no even word for it. So there's certainly atheists in that sense that have not arrived at that conclusion by some intellectual process. So we're just going to ignore them, though, because, we're not going to deal with the people that have just never been told that there was a God. So if you encounter an atheist like that, you're not being told what to do, sheeple. So, yeah. Oops. Anyways, okay, so answers to these questions, whatever your answers would be different than mine, more than likely. Some of them might be the same, but nonetheless, they're going to vary from person to person. But there's two questions here. What reasons do you have for holding the position? And is there reason/evidence for holding position that you defend? Which is kind of the same question as before, but worded slightly differently. So, I would take time and energy to answer from my own stance on this, and you, as my audience, can feel free to put your answer to this in the comments below. But the person that is doing this, the sheeple that are doing this, aren't caring about the answers. This isn't about finding out information. This is about attacking and trolling people. I think that's clear by now. If it wasn't before, I think it is by now. And that's my continued position on this. I wouldn't have problems with asking these questions if you were really sincerely seeking the information from the person. But that's not what this is intended for, so I do have an issue with it. Quote, if you say that atheism needs no evidence or reason, then you are holding a position that has no evidence or rational basis. If so, then isn't it simply faith? End quote. I'm really not sure who would say that there's no reason for it, but certainly no one could have evidence for a universal negative. Is there any evidence of there not being a God? Yeah, the lack of evidence for a God. But that's not evidence that it's not there, and we could loop infinitely because screw logic. To add to that is the whole 2Q idea that it's just faith. Gee willikers, make atheism faith. That will really piss them off. Okay, let's play along for fun. Just say, yeah, it is faith. So is faith good or bad? Let's answer that question. Let's see if they can wiggle out of that one, because if faith is good, then it's good that I have it, and if it's bad, then it's bad that we both have it. Unless you're going to say you don't have faith, you have evidence. So, okay, where's the evidence? And then you're not going to produce that. So you do have faith. And we could go on, back and forth with that nonsense. Or you could even just say, well, yeah, it's faith. My flying spaghetti monster told me that atheism was true. and you could troll them right back. But I don't want you to troll them. That's the thing. See, unlike Matt, I don't want people to just troll each other. I want people to learn. Not just about themselves, but about other people, and to be willing to challenge what they hold most dear. But screw all that, because we're talking to sheeple, and we're just getting people to cut and paste things to troll atheists, because that's the thing to do. Let's get these sheeple to think, because nothing will scare them more than thinking for themselves. Quote, if you say atheism is supported by the lack of evidence for God, then it is only your opinion that there is no evidence. End quote. So, let me think about this for a while. Is this just a special knowledge claim of what I know? There is no evidence for leprechauns. Would anyone, except for those few people that believe in leprechauns, disagree with me? Or the fae folk? There's a few people in Ireland and perhaps in Scotland who believe in that. Very few. But nonetheless, there are people that believe that. They would have an issue with me saying that there are no fae folk. Or somebody that believes that fairy rings are special in some way, shape, or form. No, they're not. We understand how they work, naturally speaking. Okay. What about the few people out there, which are in higher numbers, that believe in alien abductions? If I say there are no alien abductions, those people will take issue with that. If I say there's no evidence for alien abductions, their answer tends to be that there is evidence, but the government is concealing it. Or there is evidence, but you don't believe the evidence we have, and here's film footage that's completely fake. And when you try to point out that it's fake, it's like, oh, you don't believe it. You just don't believe it. It's obviously real, but you just don't believe it. It's not a special pleading. So when it comes to God, I don't have any evidence of it. And you say, well, just look around you. Just look around you. How many times have we been told to look around us? I'm like, I'm looking around. I don't see it. It's not here. Where is it? Well, it's designed. There is no design. And if there is design, that doesn't necessitate intelligence anyways. Because things can appear to be designed, but in fact aren't designed. So how could we tell the difference? We have biological evolution for life. So that's settled. Abrogenesis, we have different theories about that. Maybe not settled yet. Universe, we have cosmology, the Big Bang. Not necessarily totally settled, but pretty close to being settled for the beginning of the Big Bang. Not necessarily settled, but getting closer to it every day. But people who insist that there is evidence have to point at things and say that that's evidence when it doesn't count as evidence. It doesn't pass the rigors of the scientific treatment, the logical treatment. And those are really the only treatments I care about, because if you go about it philosophically, you can really get any answer you want. And if you go about it theologically, you'll get the answer that that particular theism wants you to get anyways. So, using the systems that I can trust, I don't have evidence for this. It's not just my opinion, it's fact. And what's so bizarre is that later on, Matt will be telling his sheeple to tell people that they can't prove that there's a God, making it a complete and utter moot point that this is my opinion. If it really was just my opinion that there isn't evidence, later on in this very website, they're going to admit that there's no way to prove it. In other words, that there is no evidence. So now it's not just my opinion, it is the way things are. But screw that, we're here to troll people, not to engage in thoughtful, intellectual discussions. We're here to tell them that it's nothing more than an opinion so that we can discard it as such. Shame on Matt Slick for presenting this absurd and obnoxious idea for his people to consume and then regurgitate into chat rooms and such. Quote, you cannot know all evidence for or against God. Therefore, you cannot say that there is no evidence for God. End quote. An appeal to omniscience. Nobody knows everything. Okay? You don't know everything. And that's so funny that you would say that you don't know all the evidence for God. So you can't know that there is a God for certain. Because you don't have all the evidence. The evidence isn't all in yet. We would need more evidence and we have none. But to just say, well, you don't know all the evidence, neither do you. So what? That's the fact of life. This is nothing more than an appeal to all knowledge. You don't know everything, therefore you can't say this. No, that's not true. I don't have to know everything to know when something is not. And I'll give the example I've used in the past. I have zero idea what 75 billion and 2 to the power of 75.9 and a 6 is. I don't know. I don't have any idea. I don't even know how I would begin to put all that into a calculator or a computer. Put the answer in the comments below. Now, look, I'm just saying, I don't know the answer, but I know that the answer is not 5. I know it's not 10. I know it's not 20. I know it's not a million because it's way bigger than all of those numbers. I know it's no negative numbers. I can eliminate all of that. I don't have to know what the answer is to know what the answer is not. I don't need all the evidence that there could be to know that I see no evidence for it being. You cannot know undeniably that there is a God. This is a worn, tired meme that needs to die. Die, meme, die. Burn it with fire. Quote, your atheism, then, is nothing more than an opinion. But, if it is, should you derogatorily argue against Christians and in favor of your opinion? End quote. Yes, and other faiths and religions as well. You're not the only one that I'm arguing against. And if we rewrote this, it would work just as badly for you as a Christian arguing against a different God. So here's how that could play out. If you say Christianity is based on the evidence for it, then that's only your opinion that there is evidence. You can't know all the evidence that Xenu is not the real God. Therefore, you cannot say that Xenu isn't the real God. So your Christianity is nothing more than an opinion. And why should you derogatorily argue against Xenu? So you just insert any God there, or insert no God, and it's still the same problems as it was before. What we have is nothing more than assumptions, and we have the logical error of an appeal to omniscience. You can't know everything. We have poisoning of the well because we're inserting the word derogatorily argue against in there. Why are we doing that? I don't know. It's just to poison the well. And it's a loaded question. The whole thing is a loaded question because you don't really care what the person's going to answer. You're not asking it for a legitimate reason. Your motives for putting all these questions in there is to see how they react. So that's a big problem. All of those things are problems. The thing is, even if it is just an opinion that there isn't evidence for God, even if that is an opinion, that doesn't mean anything. And as far as derogatorily arguing, no, there's nothing derogatory about this at all. Your God is just as made up as every other God as far as I can tell. Your God isn't the real God as far as I can tell. And if you were being taught to understand that this isn't a black and white, this isn't an us versus them, then you would get that. If you start arguing against any other God that exists, you'll find yourself with the problem of not being able to prove that your God is any more real than theirs. Both of you lack something that the skeptics are demanding from you. And neither of you seems equipped to understand why that's so important to have. You can't just go around saying, our God's real, other gods aren't real. But that's exactly what Matt Slick wants the sheeple to do. And that's exactly what we see Matt Slick and other sheeple doing. It's not going to work. It didn't work before. It's not going to work this time. Moving on. Quote, if you say that atheism needs no evidence to support it because it's a position about the lack of something, then do you have other positions that you hold based upon the lack of evidence? Like, say, screaming blue ants? End quote. Please, never again mention the screaming blue ants. I must suppress memory of them. The horror. The horror. Okay, so I guess this is to try to change the wording that the atheist has used. I don't believe in leprechauns. I don't believe in God. And now I don't believe in screaming blue ants, but only because I suppress my memory. And I also don't think that they are a thing. Beyond just not having a belief in them, I also think that they do not exist. But there's a giant asterisk there. Leprechauns, in theory, with how big the universe is, could exist on some other planet. If, on that planet, rainbows actually have ends to them, then I suppose a creature like a leprechaun could exist and could hide their gold at the end of rainbows, although the rainbows aren't stationary, and that would be an issue too. I guess that such a being could exist if biological evolution did that for some reason. But I don't have any reason to think that it is the case. So, although I'm very comfortable in saying there are no leprechauns, that asterisk is still there because one day, in the future, maybe we'll go to a different planet, and maybe we'll find leprechauns, and then I'll be freaking wrong. And I'll be like, cool, I was wrong, alright, awesome. I don't think that we need to always add this asterisk. I think that it's meant to be that we kind of take it for granted within our language that the other person knows that we are mentally adding in these asterisks so that we can save time. Instead of saying, well, there are no leprechauns on this planet, but there could be leprechauns somewhere else, but I don't have any evidence to believe that there are, so therefore I don't think that there are any leprechauns at all. Instead of saying all that, we just say there are no leprechauns, and it saves us so time. In the same way, I might say that regarding God. I've never seen an example of God. Now, could God evolve? I don't know. It depends what God is or isn't, and who gets to define what a God would be or wouldn't be, and I think that there's problems in and of that issue too. But until we find that to be the case, I'm very comfortable in saying no to that, just as I am in the leprechauns. And again, that asterisk should be implied. You should know that, yes, I am open to the idea of there being anything that's logically possible out there to be. I'm willing that that's a possibility, but just because it's a possibility doesn't mean it is. You have to demonstrate that it is. Quote, do you hold the position that they do not exist or that you lack belief in them too? End quote. Thanks again, Matt, for getting sheeple to think in terms of black and white only. That binary thinking is so useful. And if you can't tell, I'm being sarcastic. I could ask the same question regarding Zeus. Do you believe that Zeus doesn't exist, or do you lack a belief in Zeus? Which is it? Or is it both? Does it matter? Because the result is really the same. If you believe that Zeus is not, you'll be in the same place that you were if you just lacked a belief in Zeus. So, does it really matter? Does it? Well, one has the burden and the other doesn't. Yeah, if we're in a debate, but we're not even in a debate yet. We're supposed to be in inquiry dialogue because that's what asking questions is about. Or an information exchange dialogue, depending. This one sounds more like an inquiry dialogue to me. But, of course, we're not in that dialogue. We're arguing using questions, so we're putting on formal fallacies in here to try to piss off people, I guess. That's the only conclusion I could really... I know, I've said that over and over again, but just bear with me here. Okay, so... does it matter? No, really, does it matter if I say there is no God or I don't believe in God? Does it matter? It's the same result. Now you say, well, there is no God, you need to have an argument for that. You're right, I do. If I don't have an argument, you get to dismiss it, okay? But do I get to say it? Yes, I get to say it. And not only do I get to say it, I get to believe that. I get to think that that's true. And I get to keep thinking that it's true until somebody shows me that it's not true. In the same way that I can say that there are no leprechauns, unicorns, fairies, goblins, orcs, demons, dragons, etc., etc., etc. Because there's no reason to think that there is. Not from the two ways that I would use for everything else. And I'm not going to give a special exception for the realm of the supernatural, which also is unprovable, untestable, unverifiable, undemonstratable, with zero evidence for it, because it's not natural, and therefore either doesn't exist or exist in a way that we could never tell that it existed. Therefore, we could never show that it existed or know that it existed. Quote, people behave according to what they believe, not what they lack belief in. End quote. Do what now? So, Matt's telling his sheeple just outright lies. I mean, he's been doing that a lot, but just lie to him. Just at this point, it just doesn't even matter whether, just lie. Oh, really? Alright, fine. I know it's... hello?
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah? Who's this?
It's Outright Lie!
How do I know that you're Outright Lie? You don't sound like Outright Lie. You're not as near as loud as you were before.
You turned down the volume, you idiot!
Oh, yeah, that's right. I turned down the volume. I forgot about that. So, yeah. You didn't lie about either of those things.
Yeah, it's confusing, isn't it?
So, are you going to lie about something now?
No.
So that... Wait. How do I know when you're lying?
I'm lying right now.
But if you are lying, then you're telling the truth.
Yep.
Wait, but that's a paradox.
Uh-huh. Think about it.
I'm hanging up. Alright, so, anyways... So, yeah, you don't act according to what you don't believe in. So then you do act. So then it is a belief. See, because you don't, your actions don't change based on what. But that doesn't. No, that's not true. There's things I don't believe in, and that does change how I act about things. I don't believe in leprechauns, so I'm not looking at the end, even though there is no real end to a rainbow for pots of gold. See, if I did believe in them, then my actions would change. But my negative action, that is to say, my not doing that, is because I don't believe in them. Okay, I'm not afraid of ghosts. So I don't do anything to protect myself from ghosts. I don't believe in God, so I don't go to any church. That's an action that I am not doing. Not doing something is also an action. And I am not doing that because I don't believe in X, Y, and Z things. But, it's not important because sheeple just listen to Matt Slick and believe that not believing in something means that you will not... whatever! Just move on. Screw it. I can't even... post in the comments below. Try to make sense out of that sentence, because I can't do it. Quote, so, if you are an atheist, and you work against the idea that God exists, then aren't you behaving in a manner consistent with your beliefs? End quote. Lobsters. Yep, just say lobsters when they ask this. Just type BRB, cats on fire. Bleep, I don't know. This one's just whacked. It's clearly meant to just piss people off. Belief, it's all belief. Nah. I'm arguing against the God that you believe in because I don't think it's any more real than any other God. I'm arguing because I want you to understand my points, not just ignore them or overlook them. I'm arguing because Christianity, as well as other religions, are hugely dominant and control things. And we have people that have control over the red button that believe the world's going to end. That scares the bleep out of me. I don't want someone that believes the world's going to end to have control over that red button, because they might just think, well, maybe it's supposed to end now. Beep! And that's it. And it doesn't because they pressed it. I'd rather have someone that doesn't believe in any of that in charge. That's why I argue. But does it matter why I argue against you or other religions? Why do you argue against other religions? Because they're not true. Exactly! But screw it. Just say lobsters. Lobsters all the way home. Okay, so part 2 of video 2 of part of left. Look forward to me losing my mind in that one, because Matt will tell his sheeple to tell us of that they can argue using logic, and then give them logical fallacies to use. Just go ahead and put up Deconverted Man loses his mind throughout that entire video just to save time. That will be the only thing in that video, because I know I'm going to lose my mind during it. Join me then, of purple.